Hello and welcome to GreenStones online meeting about beating the COVID recession and making more money or having profit for sanity during the recession. So for those that have joined since the last time I was here, I've got a bit of sun shining through the window on me this morning. I've got a bit of a makeshift blind up because the blind that should be there has not arrived yet. But anyway, cut a long story short, the sun is shining on the righteous, as they would say. But anyway, it's Tuesday morning. So we're now at 9:31. So to get started, this morning we're going to be sharing some ideas and some concepts around how to make more money at any time of the year, but in particular during a recession. And we're going to finish off with some numbers, a little spreadsheet that as accountants obviously love, in order to show you the difference between what happens when you increase prices rather than reduce your prices, and it's a fascinating and very often enlightening conversation and demonstration. So I'm really looking forward to that part of the webinar. But without further ado, I will shut up and introduce and hand over to Nicola, who is going to talk you through, I think we've got 26 different ideas when I went through and added them up last night, 26 different ideas and concepts that you can introduce in your business in order to make more money. And as I always do, I don't know why, but we end with a wave and we start with a clap. So over to Nicola.
Thank you to the righteous Simon. So what we're going to do, nightmare. What we're going to do, good morning everyone, like Simon said, we're going to take you through a presentation. So hopefully you can see my screen. Yeah.
Yes, I can see it, Nicola.
Perfect. So Leah, like Simon said, last week we spoke about cash flow. This week we are talking about profit. So just to go through for a start where we're up to. So just to double check, if people were on the webinar last week, they'll have already seen this, but just a recap. So the expectation is that sharp decline in that graph is when the lockdown first hit. So everything was closed, business economy slowed right down, and then the graph's likely to pick back up as we're beginning to see shops, businesses reopening. But just beware, quarter one, quarter two, 2021, that is likely to be another recession come in because obviously taxes become due, loans become repayable, second rent quarters come payable, possible redundancies. So this is the recession as we see it. And so when you're making decisions on your business for cash or profit, like we're about to look at, this is the graph you want to have in mind to remember we might go back into a recession next year. It's very likely. So if you have always do what you have always done, you will always get what you have always got, or less. So we're going to look in this webinar about what you can do on profits, so cost, sales, etc., what you can work with and how you can change to what you've done before so that you keep ahead of your competitors, keep ahead of the economy, and obviously keep your business thriving. So like before, we looked at the cash with the little pig. How can he operate efficiently for cash? This time we will be looking at profits. So turnover is for vanity, profit is for sanity, and cash is king. So it doesn't matter necessarily what your sales are. It's very common for a business owner to want to look at that sales, that top line of their accounts, and think about how much have I sold this month compared to last, or this year compared to last, which is obviously a number to look at, but the number that actually matters is profit, because it doesn't matter if you keep selling loads if your costs are exceeding that. So profit is made up of sales less your costs, and that is what equals profit. So to have a look at your profit and to increase profit, there are two elements we're going to work through: sales and the costs. So if you can control both of those, increase the sales, decrease the costs, obviously your profit will grow. So let's start with costs.
Just before we start, Nicola, I forgot in my rush with the sun shining on us. If anybody's got any questions during the course of the presentation, just please feel free to ask them, and then I'll interrupt Nicola like this. So if you post them in the Q&A box or post them in the chat box, then I'll interrupt Nicola and we'll ask the questions as we go through. Because obviously we're giving you the information that we think you want to hear. But if there's specific stuff that you want to ask, then please post them in the Q&A box or post them in the chat box. And we've also got some questions that people have posted when they registered. We'll get to those at the end if they're not answered during the course of the presentation. So I'll disappear again, Nicola, and shut up. But ask questions if you want to.
Thank you. So obviously costs. So there are usually within a business 4 main costs that you can look at to work with. So obviously the larger the cost, the more impact they have. So even a small change on such a large cost can have a massive impact on your business. So firstly, let's think about purchases. So purchases, the materials you buy to deliver the goods or the services that you deliver to your customers. So how can you reduce the cost of purchases? There are 2 main ways. The first one is to pay less for what you're purchasing. So look at your suppliers, look at, are you getting the best deal, and look at value. So are you getting the best deal for those purchases? Could you negotiate a discount if you bulk buy, or if you continue to buy from the same supplier? Could you negotiate a discount with them? Could you basically look at any form of negotiation with them? But the one to be really careful is obviously you choose your suppliers for a reason, and that reason is value. So you don't want to be going off and just buying from a completely different cheap supplier just because it's cheap, because that will obviously compromise your quality, and quality is obviously a major thing. So you don't want to just go off and find any supplier. It needs to be in line with your keeping, but the value is the word that we're looking at here. So pay less is the first one. And then the second one, how else you can reduce your purchases, is use less. So obviously, when you're using materials, there are really common things: wastage, offcuts, basically the way that you're utilising them to make sure it's most efficient. So I'll give you an example. I used to work at Sainsbury's. I was a shelf stacker, and back I used to go in for the evening shift after my college days. And what would happen, the first thing we'd talk about in that meeting, they'd have a little group huddle of all the evening shift coming on, and we would look at wastage. It was always, always, always monitored, because if we can reduce that wastage, then obviously more things were being sold, they weren't losing out on profit. So they incorporated the whole team all the way from top to bottom in the wastage policy. So for us at Sainsbury's, that meant obviously rotating the stock, looking at items with the dates on, doing checks and making sure that any dates nothing was put beyond its expiry date, but also reducing it and putting offers on items that were coming close to expiry. So that was how Sainsbury's, that was one of the ways Sainsbury's did it. But in looking for your efficiencies with your materials, there's a number of things you can do. So you can look at your systems, look at what you've got happening in the processes, and see, firstly, incorporate the whole team so everyone's a part of it instead of just you trying to take it on your own. But also, if you think about, if you had 2 metals, for example, let's say you have an expensive metal that you've been using in all of your products that you've been making. If you could substitute that metal or incorporate a cheaper one as well, so get the mix right between the two, you could obviously reduce your cost there on purchases, but still, it would still need to obviously serve the purpose of the product. So when you're doing that, you'll obviously be experimenting with what could work, what couldn't work. So you might actually also incorporate some research and development at that point. So when you're doing R&D and you're testing things and you're trying to come up with new, better situations, scenarios, then at that point, you might actually be eligible for some tax refunds, which obviously would also help with your business if you don't have to pay as much tax. So if there's any of that you've got going on, let us know and we can have a chat through if you're likely to be able to claim for R&D. So they are your purchases. They're the 2 points of purchases that you can do. So similarly, we've now got wages. So again, you could pay less for your wages. So how do you get good people but pay them less? Well, you could offer them something else in return. So if you had, for example, at GreenStones, we operate flexi time and policies where people can work from home even before the coronavirus situation. And so for our team, if they can go to their child's sports day, or they can leave early to go get their hair done, or whatever is their priority, that is proven in research to make up part of the salary. So you might be able to pay them slightly less then, but give them flexi time, working from home, other incentives that cost you less, and obviously mean that you're not paying quite as much for the team, but they're still motivated and you can still get that skill that you require. So obviously just be careful that if they are working from home, if they are doing it flexibly, you've got some form of monitor to make sure they're still working efficiently, but at the same time, it is an option. So that nicely links me into the next point, efficiencies. So if you can't pay them less, or if you can and you want to get even more of a cost saving, work them harder. So obviously there's a boundary here. You don't want to work someone too hard that they're completely knocking on breakdown door, not ideal. But if you can make things more efficient for them, so if you've got systems, do you write manuals? Do you write the processes so that each team member isn't reinventing the wheel? Do they all know what they should be doing and where to get the answers from without them spending hours searching themselves when the person sitting at the next desk has already done it? So you also could provide clarity over their roles. So whether that's communication regularly and feedback, or targets so they know what they should be working on. So it's absolutely fine paying someone for a salary, but if they're not doing what they've been employed to do, then are you getting your value from them? So that's why it's good to have clear definitions of what someone should be doing in your business to make sure they're doing it in line with getting your sales. So they are wages. So the next ones are rent and rates. They kind of come together. So there's a few things to think about here. They're obviously less negotiable than purchases, wages tend to be, but still big costs, so still obviously worth us having a look at. So are you using, if you're in an office building, are you using all of that office building, and do you need it? If you could offer, bringing back that wages point, if you could offer your team the opportunity to work from home a bit, could you reduce the size of your office and therefore reduce your rent and your rates? Similarly, if you have got a warehouse or a unit, are you utilising it all, or have you got whole walls that are empty and you don't need to be paying for as large a unit as you've got? So firstly, look at what you've got. Do you need it? Are you making the most out of it? But also just think about when you're coming up to a rent break or you're renewing, could you negotiate with your landlord about whether to maybe get a rent-free period? So we'll sign and stay on, but is there anything you can do? Can you do a rent-free, or can you do 6 months at half price? So it's always, always, always worth a chat just to see where you're at and if there's anything on offer for you. So they are your 4 main large costs. Simon, any questions on any of those before I move on to the next stage?
No, not at the moment, Nicola. Thank you.
Perfect.
Have a drink.
I wanted a drink break. Okay, now we can look at the other costs, because obviously you can control your large costs, which is a great thing to do, but it's very easy to forget about all the smaller costs as well. But like Tesco say, every little helps. So don't forget about the smaller ones just because they're only £40 for a phone going out of the bank, for example. It still will add up if you look at them. So the first thing to do is check your direct debits, run through your bank statement, and we recommend doing this for your personal bank as well as your business, and look at what are your payments going out for. Are you getting the most out of your money for those items? So for example, mobile phone, when did you last renegotiate those contracts? Electric and gas, so light and heat, that's a really common one that people just let the contract renew year on year. So when did you last look at doing a review of those prices to make sure you're getting value for your money and it's not just keeps going up for no reason, no value? So obviously you can go through your bank statements and do that yourself. Or alternatively, we have a contact who does a cost audit. So what they will do, they will work through the costs for you, so you don't have to do anything. It's on a no-win, no-fee basis. So they will negotiate, they will speak to people about the value that you're getting and look for alternatives. And so if you've not got the time to do it, it's always worth having a chat with someone else who might be able to help. So if you want details of that cost audit business, let us know. We'll put it on the feedback form and tick the box, and we'll send you over those details. And it's worth just running through the exercise to see if you're being as efficient as you can be with those costs. So if we continue to come down, insurance. Insurance is one, just to put a little disclaimer on. Obviously, you want to get good value for it, but don't just go for the cheapest. Make sure the policy in place covers you, because people will put an insurance quote, hound them down and down. Obviously, at that point, if you come to claim, you want it to still fulfill its purpose. So just be careful with that one. And there, again, there's brokers, etc., that can help you with that if you need help. Cleaning. Do you pay for a cleaner for 5 days a week when really you could do it for 4 days? Accountancy. So at the moment, are you providing your accountant with manual records? Are you giving them a spreadsheet or a bag of receipts? Whereas you could maybe look to go on a system to make it more efficient, get more out of it for yourself, and also provide a better quality of records to your accountant to keep those costs down. Bank charges. So bank charges, are you paying above the odds? Could you consider switching banks to obviously reduce those costs? So all of these, obviously, you can go through and you can look at. Just be careful, though. It's another common one that people might think, oh, to avoid that cost, I'll do it myself. So I'll do my bookkeeping myself. I'll empty the bins myself. But just be careful that for you to sacrifice your time to bring these costs down, you're then not spending your time generating revenue. And obviously, there's two sides to profit, as we saw. There's the costs, but there's also the sales. So try not to sacrifice your time that's revenue generating when you could get someone else to do this element for you. That's just a little warning there. So on costs, yeah.
So just before you move on from that, Nicola, what I'll do is in the chat box, I'll post a link to a website. We shared this last week on the first part, where people can go in and go through a budget planner, a personal budget planner. And it will give you an opportunity to it asks some questions basically and provokes your thinking around that. So that's well worth having a look at. And then the second thing, I'm not sure if you mentioned it or not, Nicola, but the cost audit chaps that we use, Stephen, as well as looking at the individual costs and reducing the individual costs, because they have the opportunity to bulk buy and take customers in bulk to the market, very often they can get it cheaper through them than what you can get if you do it yourself. So not only does it save doing the work, it also gets it cheaper, or they can get a better deal because of the bulk purchase aspect of it. But I just thought that was worth sharing, Nicola.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Okay, so remember, if you reduce your costs, it actually reduces your needs for sales. So you couldn't be an accountant doing a webinar without some numbers in here. So let's go through an example. Sales, if you made £100 worth of sales, and let's say your cost of sales on that was 75%, then obviously you've got £75 of costs. Then that means you've got gross profit directly attributed to those sales of £25. You've got 25% gross profit margin. And let's say your overheads, so all your costs you can't change, so rent, etc., will be £25, meaning that you break even, net profit 0. So let's see, to reduce your need for sales, let's see what would happen if you brought those costs down. So to get that net profit of 0, you've done a negotiation. So you might have used the cost audit, or you might have gone away and spoken to light and heat and rent and your phone company, and you've managed to knock those costs down from £25 to 20. So that means you now only need a gross profit of £20 instead of 25. So already looking better, looking easier. Then we get to cost of sales. So obviously that is usually in line with your sales, but you made some efficiencies because you've cleared some of the wastage, for example. So now it's a lower figure. It's only 74%, for example. So if your cost of sales are now 57, you only need to make £77 of sales. So exact same business, and we've not even touched the sales yet, not even looked at them, but already you need to make less because you've cut those costs as you've gone. So what does that mean? Well, for example, let's say you make £20 of sales a day on option 1, so 100 sales. That means you're making 20 a day, you're working a 5-day week. On this new option, when you've done a cost control exercise, you can now have Friday off and clock off early on Thursday. Or if you work in a 7-day week, you can actually leave on time on Friday. So that is what it means to do a cost control exercise. And that's why it's obviously a really great thing to do. So just beware, because you can do that to bring your sales down. But often people will say, oh, advertising and training, that's really easy to cut because there's no immediate effect. But advertising and training are obviously your business investing in the future. But it is proven that the businesses that continue to invest in advertising and training during a recession actually come out stronger. So they're more likely to get through a recession, and that for those that do, they actually come out stronger. So don't just think about cutting those. make sure that you're still doing something with them. So even if it's just social media for your advertising, make sure your brand awareness and your name is still out there. So advertising is a tax you pay for being unremarkable. So this is a quote by Robert Stevens, founder of the Geek Squad. So what does this quote actually mean? That obviously still pay for advertising, but the more remarkable you are, the more easier, basically, the work will come to you. Because if you're advertising and you're the exact same as competitor A, B, C, then you're not standing out. So it's harder to advertise. You have to invest more. So if you can be a standout, then obviously it makes your advertising campaign a lot easier and more cost efficient as well. So that is something to just be aware of. So any points on the cost there, Simon, or are you happy for me to move to sales?
No, that's spot on. I just will share the story of my granddad, though, if I may. My granddad always used to say to me, granddad was a business owner. He's probably, well, he was my inspiration. Granddad always used to say that running a business without advertising is like winking at a girl in the dark. So you know what you're doing, but she doesn't. I'll let you get on, Nicola, sorry.
You've told me that story before, but I felt I couldn't wink at a girl in the dark, so I left that one for you. So, right, increasing your sales. So obviously we've done costs, which was one part of profit, but the top of profit is obviously your sales. So there are 5 main ways that you can increase your sales, and we're going to work through each of these one at a time. So you can increase your prices. Obviously, if you're lifting your prices, your sales will be higher. Increase how many customers you sell to. So if you lift that, your sales will be higher. Increase how often they buy from you. Increase their average order value, and reduce your attrition rate. So reduce how many customers you're losing. So we're going to work through each of these one at a time. And as Simon said, feel free to put any questions in the Q&A box as we go. So increase your prices. So most people will say, I don't want to increase my prices. I can't, my customers won't take it. Now, so many people do say that, but just think through this. If you're not increasing your prices, but your suppliers are, you're then losing out on your own profit. So each time your supplier puts their cost up, if you don't pass that on, that is coming directly out of your profit margin, meaning that the money that you want to take for yourself to go on that lovely holiday, or the money you want to reinvest into the business to buy that new asset, that's what you're forsaking if you don't lift your prices. So obviously we're in a strange time at the moment with coronavirus and the situation. So should you still lift your prices is a question commonly asked. I would say yes, but just do it sensitively. So there's a common thing. People might think, oh, I won't lift my prices, I won't lift my prices. And then it's 10 years down the line and their costs have gone up and they've watched their profit margin deteriorate. So at that point, they might lift them by £10, shall we say. But it's much easier to do little and often. So if you did the 1% effect, so if you were going to buy a product in the supermarket and it went from £1.10 to £1.11 one year, and then the next year maybe £1.12, you were less likely to notice it or for it to put you off. Whereas if it goes from £1.10 to £1.15 over, or £1.25 overnight, that's more of a significant jump. So it's better to do small incremental increases, and that way you're not deteriorating your profit as you go. So that's the first thing you can do, increase your prices. So the next one is increase the number of customers you have. So how can you do this? So increasing the number of customers, you can obviously look at the leads you generate and the number of leads that you convert. So how can you generate new leads? You can be compellingly attractive to prospects, and that will also help your conversion. So how do you stand out? What do you do differently? So for example, most accountants will keep a timesheet and you pick up the phone and the clock will start running. And that obviously means that you're likely to get another bill for that extra bit of advice. GreenStones made that decision not to do that. So at GreenStones, we don't keep a timesheet, we fix a price. So that means that customers can phone us and say, oh, I'm thinking of buying a new car, or should have put it through the business. I've gone and done this, or I want to grow in this way, or I want to buy some new glasses, can I put them through the business? And they can pick up the phone whenever they want or drop us an email, and they're not being billed for that ad hoc advice. So that is compellingly attractive compared to obviously our competitors, where you can't get that same level of support without getting a bill. So that's one way. What can you do different that makes you stand out from your competitors? What do your customers want and need? That's the first one. So how do you actually reach those customers in the first place? People need to know that you exist. So you need to market yourself. So people will often worry about the use of the word marketing, but all it is selling your expertise, or not even selling, demonstrating your expertise to the market. So if you're a mortgage broker, you might have some great mortgage deals that I don't know about because I'm just trundling along over here on my own. And therefore, if you're putting out there on a social media or on your website, or you're educating people on LinkedIn, then you're going to come into my awareness and I'm going to think, oh, they know what they're talking about. So same with if you're a hairdresser. At the moment, I'm having problems with my roots because I can't get to the hairdresser. But I've seen no end of hairdressers on my Facebook suggesting products that obviously they can then sell. And it's also making me think these people know what they're saying. So it's bringing their brand to the top of my awareness. So social media, website, education, all a great option for marketing. And the great thing is social media, relatively cheap compared to how many people you can reach. So then your referral system. So obviously you've got customers already. And if those customers are happy customers, are they telling people they're a happy customer? Are they saying, we used this estate agent and they did a great job for us. They were more, they got involved. They actually cared about what we wanted. They spent the time and picked up the phone. Are you telling people? Are your customers telling people? So how can you make sure this happens? Well, have you got any systems in place? Do you have a referral system? So this is quite a large area. So we're going to do a future webinar on referrals that you can obviously feel free to join, and we'll put some details out in the future on this. But what can you do for referrals? A really easy one. Once this webinar's over, go to your emails, and on the bottom of your emails, you obviously have your signature that's probably got your name and a fancy logo. Have you put on there something along the lines of, by the way, we're always out looking for new business, or if you think we've done a great job, can you recommend us? Or do you know of anyone else we can help? So something along those lines on the bottom of your email signature, and then everyone you're emailing is seeing, and you're just flagging to them, oh, they're looking to grow, or they're looking for business, or yes, they have done a great job and my friend over the road would benefit from this. So that's another great one that you can do so people know you exist. So you've got your marketing, you've got people knowing you exist now, but how do you now sell? So you need to think about this, obviously, in having a system. So from the point that someone first picks up the phone or drops you an email inquiry or fills in a box on your website, what is the journey of that prospect? So how many times do you talk to them? What's the process? Do you meet them? Do you do a Zoom meeting? Do you pick up the phone? Is it all email? So what's the process? And then during that, there's an acronym called SPIN. So if you look at SPIN for sales, that allows you to look at their situation, S, P, find where the problem is. So what's the problem to someone? I, what are the implications of that? And N, what is that need? So that you can see what the actual problem is that your customer is having or potential customer is having. And that allows you to help them and support them to the best and give them the value they're looking for. So for example, we might have someone who says, my situation is I'm behind with my taxes. The problem is that the HMRC are on my back and sending me threatening letters. The implications are that I can't now afford to do the purchases that I need to because I've got to pay HMRC this chunk of money. So I need someone to help me negotiate with HMRC, find a way to resolve this and allow me to continue running my business instead of paying HMRC all this money in one hit and having to close. So the need I need to fulfill is how can I provide them with that help to fix HMRC problem? Can I pick up the phone, etc. So that's a great one that when you're working through a sale, work through those points in your head so you can see what they're actually looking for from you. And then finally, the follow-up process. So it's obviously easier if you're in a meeting for someone to say, yeah, that's great, we're going to sign up right now, we want that product, we want that new kitchen, etc., etc. But in reality, a lot of people want to go away and have a chat, think it through, look at their options, etc., which is obviously completely understandable. But the moment someone leaves your room or your meeting, they get distracted. So they've got voicemails they need to return, they've got this they need to do, they've got that they need to do. So it is proven that there is on average 7 touch points needed from that first meeting to when someone's going to sign up. So what is your follow-up system? Do you have points that you do? Do you just leave it and hope they'll come back? Or do you touch points at regular intervals? So that might be agreeing another phone conversation just to see how they're getting on, or if there's any questions. It might mean that you arrange another meeting and go through what you've sent over to them. So maybe you've done a proposal, maybe you've designed as an architect, maybe you've done a design of a quote, and you want to talk through that and give them more detail and say, look, so what I do for this fee is this, and this bit's the council, and this is the building regs. So they understand what they're paying for. But think outside the box. You don't just need to do meetings or calls. You could send them a sample of one of your products. You could send them an invite to an event. You might want to, they might say, oh, I'm really struggling with my bank at the moment. And you know a great banking manager, and you take them along for a coffee with them and make an introduction. You might send them a book to help with the process of what they're doing, a book or a podcast. So it just keeps your brand awareness there, and touch points will allow them to remember, oh yeah, I must come back to that, or oh yeah, they have been really helpful. I'm going to look at progressing things forward with them. So they are all items that you can do to increase your number of customers. So I'm going to have a quick drink. Any questions, Simon?
Yeah, there's a question from Peter, which I'll answer while you're just having a drink, about the book. The book is called Spin Selling. It's by a chap called Neil Rachman, and it's a really interesting book. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'll put a link in the chat box. I'm not 100% sure. I think that's the middle of the 90s version, so there might be an updated version on Amazon. So that's the book that it is, but go and have a look. So that's Spin Selling by Neil Rachman, and it talks you through a process on how to take a prospect through to a sale. And for me, the really interesting part of that is that when we are selling, the majority of non-sales people, they look at the situation, there's S, and the problems to a degree, but they never talk about the implications of those problems. And the implications are the pain. That's where it hurts. And we're not comfortable going into the pain with a prospect, and therefore we never get to the need, the real need. But yeah, Peter, so that book is Spin Selling by Neil Rachman, and I've popped it in the chat box for you, and just concentrate or think about the implications or the pain that you're solving on behalf of the customer. Are you finished drinking, Nicola? Brilliant.
I have, yes, thank you. Okay. So the next thing we now look at is increase how often they buy. So if you've got current customers, then they already know you. They already know the service you provide. They already trust you. They like you. They know the goods are a high quality. So if you provide, for me, for example, I struggle to find, I've got a project house going on, and I struggled to find a good plumber. And I went for about 5 or 6 of them. And then I eventually found one who actually spoke to me and explained why things needed to be done this way, and this bit might be more expensive, but it means that you'll save money on the next bit. So for me, it was much easier for me to trust him because I'd built a relationship at that point. So because if you trust, like, and have been working with someone, then you've kind of already got that connection and they know you're doing a good job. So at that point, what more of your current customers' needs could you help with? So obviously, for example, from our point of view, we might do somebody's accounts and their payroll, but we might not do their bookkeeping because they might have had a bookkeeper do it before, or they might be doing it in-house. So if they already know that we can do the accounts and the payroll well, then can they look at us doing the bookkeeping too to aid with that? So they've already got the relationship, which makes the pitch, I guess you'd call it, easier than if you were to speak to someone who you've never spoken to before, because obviously they don't know if they trust you at that point. It's all a brand new relationship. So a common one here is, yes, systems for encouraging, rewarding, enabling for frequent purchases by customers. So loyalty cards. So you might go to a sandwich shop and you get a little card and they stamp it every time you buy your lunch. And when you've had 10, you get the last one, you get the 11th one free or for 50% off. So it encourages you to come back. Another great example here is a hairdresser. So if you were saying to your hairdresser, oh, I'll come every month, or January, February, March, instead of booking you in monthly, if they actually book you in 4 weekly, so every 4 weeks, they actually get 13 appointments and 13 lots of sale in that year as opposed to 12. So that's just when they go to their diary, they turn the page 4 times and that's the day they want you on. They don't want to be, if you can't do that day, they don't want to be pushing you into the future, because obviously that's going to reduce their number of sales. So what can you do when you think of your order books or people returning? What can you do to encourage them to buy more from you? So that is increasing how often they buy. So the next one is increasing their average order value. So if you've got someone, if your average sale is £100, what can you do to make that average sale slightly higher? So the first one is a pricing system. So when I got married, I went to tons of wedding dress shops. I was so fussy, but I went to tons of wedding dress shops. And the ones that were obviously, they'd got a pricing system in place, they would start by putting me in the most expensive dress in the shop. But let's just say, I dread to think how much they were, I try to block it out, but let's just say they were putting me in a £5,000 wedding dress, and all the lace feels so intricate and delicate, and it's a really stunning dress, but I don't want to pay £5,000. So then every dress they put me in from there, if we go to a £4,000 one, oh, it feels like a bit of a bargain because it's no longer £5,000, but the quality is not quite as good. So you can have a good bet that I'm not going to go from a £5,000 dress to a £1,000 dress, because I've felt what the £5,000 feels like, and I now don't want to go to £1,000, and it still feels like I'm getting a bargain. So that's called tailor down pricing. Start at the top and work down through from your premium quality to the lower qualities. And then to go with that, in that wedding dress shop, I go to the counter to pay for my dress, and I'm parting with, let's say, £4,000. And at this point, they then offer me shoes for £50 and a veil for £100 and a necklace for £40. And because these numbers sound so small compared to that £4,000, I'm thinking, oh, it's nothing. So I'm just adding on all these extras. So that's because you've got an anchor, it's called. So when you buy a new car, you might go and buy a car value of 30 grand, and they say, do you want the sat nav in that? That'll be £500. And you think £500 compared to 30 grand? Yeah, fine. Whereas you could go on Amazon and buy a TomTom for 100 quid or whatever it is. So that's the way you deal with pricing systems. You look at the prices you're setting and make sure you're starting at the top, working down, because it's easier then to get someone to go on a more premium product. So that's a pricing system. Then the quality of your customers. So if you might say, why does this fit in with your average order value? You will have built a business, a service, a product where you've got an ideal customer in mind, but do you actually know who that ideal customer is? So some people, a lot of marketing people would say you should draw that person out. So get a pad and pen and draw who your ideal customer is to buy that product. So it doesn't matter if you have loads of different ones, just focus on one and think about it. So I've done an exercise before where there was a sporty watch where for a man, a sporty watch was being bought, and we had to work out what this man would look like. So everyone around the room had different ideas, but we went down to the detail of what car he drove, etc., etc. So we knew who our ideal customer was. So when you know your ideal customer, what does that do for you? Well, it allows you to target your ideal customer. So when you're writing a blog, you're not writing it to anyone and everyone. You're thinking about your ideal customer, and you're basically targeting them, and you're writing as if you're writing to just them. So what does that mean, and how does that help your order value? Well, what that means is, if you've got your ideal customers on board, your service or your product is designed for them. So they're more likely to buy the best version of it or more of it, because you're ticking all the boxes for them. So it allows you to obviously sell more to them. Whereas if you've got someone who's half ideal, half not, then you might not necessarily be able to sell as much as you could because they're not really right for you. So you might make a bit of a sale, but not a full-blown sale. So how can you know your ideal customer? So obviously the drawing is one, but another one is to be specific. So when you look at your customers, you could even go as far as grading them. So you could look at, is this customer ideal for me? Is this customer ideal for me? And work for them one at a time. And if they are an ideal customer, then you can have a look at what they've got going on and have they got every service or every product that would benefit them? So are they getting the most from you? That's another way. So then upselling systems. Upselling is if you go to get the train and you get a standard price ticket, you ask for a standard ticket and the cashier says, oh, actually, we've got a first class ticket, which is only £10 more and you'll be completely in the peaceful, luxurious seats. So she will have just upsold you for that £10. They've had £10 more of revenue that you're thinking, yeah, okay. Same with when you're obviously going to a hotel. So if you go into a hotel, you might have booked the standard room without breakfast, without dinner. They'll say, did you want breakfast? Did you want dinner? Did you want to upgrade to a balcony room? So they're looking at upselling you. So what in your business, what's your basic package and what could you provide them as an extra? So a little bit like the wedding dress where they tried to sell me everything in the kitchen sink when I got to the checkout. Same sort of principle. Cross-selling. So what is cross-selling? Cross-selling is when you look at your customer base and you look at what services they're receiving. So there's a graph called, or a chart even, called a windows of opportunity chart. So along the top, you'd list all your services. So for us, for example, we might have, I'll just keep it to a few because this list could go on. You could have accounts, payroll, bookkeeping, budgets, and then down the side, etc., all along the top. And down the side, we might have customer A, customer B, customer C. So all the way down. And what you do, you put a tick in the box that they've got. So maybe everyone's got accounts and most people have got payroll, but only a few have got bookkeeping. So firstly, I'm looking at those ones in the gaps in payroll thinking, well, do they not have a payroll or are they using payroll elsewhere? So that's the first thing to look at. And then you look at sort of, are they doing their own payroll and are they struggling with it? Could we help them? And then you'd look at bookkeeping. So you might say, we've only got a few people with bookkeeping. Why is that? So you might say, oh, well, people are doing it themselves or people are still on spreadsheets instead of software. So can you cross-sell? So cross-selling is another great one with hairdressers, for example. They might have the normal hair treatment and then they go on and they now do a mini scalp massage whilst you're having your hair wash. So they might think, well, this customer always has the scalp massage and always likes that. So now at that point, they might also like the product that I put in their hair at that point. So you start cross-selling different items across your customer base. And then obviously it's all about talking. So if one customer's had it and you're saying to another customer who's in the sink, oh, the other day I had so-and-so in here and they had this treatment and their hair was so glossy afterwards, could you cross-sell that to someone else? So that's another option. And then the final one on this slide is understanding your true product cost. So what does that mean? What that means is you need to know where your profit margins are. So it's all well and good having loads of different products or loads of different services, but do you know which ones to actually push or do you know which ones make you the money? So I'll give you an example. When you go in a clothes shop, you might be standing waiting in the queue at the checkout and they have along the queue lots of different like shelves or pots where they've got the little bits in there. So if they've got a shelf of cards and they're selling those cards for £3 and they only buy them for 10p, there's a £2.90 margin there on every card. However, if they were putting a plant there, they might buy the plant for £2 and only sell it for free. So they're making a £1 margin. So at that point, you would want all of your queue area to be more cards than plants because that's where your profit is. So unless you know what your products truly cost you and what your sales truly cost you, you can't know which ones to prioritize and how to make a decision. So that's a really important part. And that can be done in Xero or with your pricing systems or your bookkeeping. So feel free to have a chat with your bookkeeper or with us, if that's us, to talk about if you don't feel confident that you know every product inside out, then what can you do with your systems to make it so you do? Because that is fundamental. So that's your order value. So the next one is reducing your attrition rate. So this means don't lose your customers. If you've got loyal customers, how do you keep them loyal? So the first thing to do is to be outstanding. Deliver an outstanding service. So what are you doing for your customers? What is the experience they go on when they buy from you? So even if they're just buying a product, they might buy Apple. You might get Apple in a lovely white box with all the neat bits and it all turns up lovely. Or Tiffany jewelry. They'll put it in the little green bag and it'll have a white bow around it and it'll all be wrapped beautifully. So it's not just a purchase. I'm not just walking away with an item. I'm walking away with a service and an experience. And even from the moment I first walk in the shop, they're giving me an experience. So I'm more likely to be loyal because as well as the actual product, I've also gone through an experience and been made to feel special and wonderful and lovely and etc. So what can you do with your services or your goods to allow someone to feel like you've gone above and beyond for them? So become more valuable. So it's harder for them to do without you. So obviously, how can you do this? A number of ways. So as well as the little points we've just talked through, company culture is a great one. So innocent smoothies are obviously very strong on protecting the environment. So it's not just a smoothie on the shelf. You're looking at what they do for the earth, the global warming, etc., which is obviously very important at the moment. So if people find that that topic is close to their heart, they're probably never going to buy another smoothie because they know that Innocent are going through a process to allow them to be in line with basically the environment. But you've also got asking for feedback. So do you ask your customers for feedback? Do you say, like, what have we done that's great for you? What could we do that's improved? What could be an improvement? What could we do to make your experience greater? So do you ask your customers for feedback and feedback on that to your team? So if when people come into our door, into our reception, they are seen within 6.8 seconds. Why do we know that's important? Because if you hear people saying, and then you just get left in reception and no one comes to see you. So it's an important thing. It shows that a customer matters. So what can you do in yours to make them feel great? So what that means is we've obviously looked at costs and sales, and small movements can make a big difference. So I'm going to get out a lovely spreadsheet. So what we're going to do here, we are going to work through the first option. So let's say this is your current point. You've got 500 leads that come through the door. You convert 40% of them at the moment. So that means that you make 200 sales. If each of those sales buys from you once a year, your average order value is £500, then you're making 100 grand of sales and there's no price increase at this point. So your sales are 100 grand. Cost of sales, 75% on that. So your gross profit's 25 grand, so 25%. Your overheads are the same, so you break even. So let's say, I've got a bit skew with, there we go. Let's say that you want to reduce your prices. So a common one is, well, I don't want to lose business. I don't want to lose my customers. So I'm going to reduce my prices, or I don't want to put the price up. In fact, I'm going to bring it down to make sure I keep customers. Why is that dangerous? So why is that dangerous? If you keep all of the top parts the same, all the leads, the average value, order value, etc., and you decrease your price by just 10%, then let's see what happens. So you've now made 100,000 sales, but 10% less. So you're now only making £90,000 in money of sales. So your cost of sales is still 75% of the 100 grand. The material prices are still the same, even though you've chosen to reduce your cost. So you've now got 75,000 of costs. So your gross profit is 15 grand on that. meaning that when you take off your overhead, your fixed costs, you're now making a loss. So what do you need to do to make break even? So if we look here, the 15 grand of gross profit is now 17% of your sales. So it's worse. So if we work this back, you now actually need to sell just shy of 150 grand's worth in order to make break even. So for a 10% price decrease, you're now needing to sell 50% more basically. So if you're doing 5 days a week, you need to do 7.5 days, and we're good, but we can't give you an extra half a day a week. I'd love that, but unfortunately not. So that is the danger in decreasing a price. So all those items we've just looked at about the customer experience and being valuable, that's where you want to concentrate your efforts on, not on the price. So let's flip this and be a bit more positive. Let's put that price back. Ooh. Let's put that price back to where we were. So if we now go back to the start point of the 500, you've now got, if you increase every item by just 1%, so instead of making 500 leads, you have 505 leads. And instead of converting 40%, you convert 40.4%. You've now made 204 sales instead of 200. So that's just 4 more sales. If you then change that frequency, so the hairdresser example, if they're coming to you 1.01 times a year instead of 1, and you've lifted their order value by just £5, so 1% again, your sales are now 104 grand instead of 100. Let's then lift the price by 1%, because remember, little and often instead of one big chunk in one go. So your sales are now 105 grand. Cost of sales are back on the 25% of that. So cost of sales at 75%, gross profit 25%, and you're now making a profit of 2 grand. Let's make that even better. What if you did 5%? So if you only did 5%, such a small change, you're now making 11.5 grand of profit when you were making break even. So all that is looking at each of those points one by one. So obviously we've gone through some examples in here of what you could do as a whole, but if you want ideas bespoke to your business, then that is something that we can help you with. So feel free to let us know, drop me an email or a phone call, and we can go through that. But obviously it just shows what such a little change can make such a huge difference. So what is the one thing you're going to do today? So it's great watching a webinar. It's great understanding new things and learning new things. But remember, when you close this webinar, you're going to have phone calls, emails, etc. So whilst you're in this zone, out of what we've just talked through, what is the one thing you're going to do? So is it going to be referrals on your email signature? Is it going to be looking at your customer experience? Are you going to buy the spin book and you're going to read through the process of how to convert a sale? So what is your one shot? So thank you very much for listening. We'll go for any questions now, but there will also be a feedback form in the chat. If you wouldn't mind filling that out, then obviously that just helps us to evaluate our customer experience, as we've just said. And to know what we can do to improve or what went well, so we can basically duplicate it in the future. And then obviously if you've got any other questions, then feel free to contact me on nicola@greenstones.co.uk. So thank you very much for listening.
That's brilliant, Nicola. Thank you very much. So that feedback form's in the chat box. So if you just click on that, enter your name, and then tick the boxes and share your one thing so we can follow up with you, that'd be great. There's a couple of questions that I just want to ask. So if anybody else has got any questions, you pop them in the chat box now or in the Q&A. Just while you do that, Nicola, if you could go back to that spreadsheet for me, please, because it just... For me, out of all of the things that we've shared in that presentation this morning, the most important part of that is people's desire. Almost they feel compelled to reduce their prices, especially as we enter a recession. The demand and the passion to reduce prices in order to retain the business or feel as though they're protecting the business, the dramatic effect that that can have. Now, if you look at the numbers that we've got on there, that the £90,000, the drop of 10% from 100,000, and maintaining your cost of sales figure at 75%. Now, in reality, what will happen is your suppliers will be increasing their prices, so that'll actually get a bit worse. But the realization that you have to work 2.5 times, nearly 2.5 times as hard on a 10% reduction in price in order just to stay the same. That's not to get ahead. That's just to stay the same. Is obviously a profound number. Now, if you've got some numbers within your business, you've got a P&L account, a profit and loss account that you want to share with us, then we will gladly put those numbers into this Excel spreadsheet and work those numbers for you so you can see how much extra work that you've got to do. And I say we, it'll be Nicola that does it'll be Nicola that works the numbers. But it's a shock factor in order to help you have the confidence when you're talking to your customers about prices going forward, to make sure that you protect your business and don't end up working 7.5 days a week in order to maintain your income. So I just wanted to highlight that, because for me, it's a very easy thing to say, oh yeah, it's just 5% or just 10%. When in reality, it can have a very big detrimental effect to your business. So thank you, Nicola, for that. So we have, at the moment, 3 questions in 4 minutes. Vivian's asked, how do we keep our income consistent? What can we do in order to keep the income consistent?
So there's a number of things you can do there. If you mean sort of on a seasonality, then the most important thing is to know your patterns. So if you're going to have a low dip and you know that's coming, or if you don't know that's coming and you begin to see it, then what can you do to raise that? So up your marketing game, maybe put some form of offer on. So offer doesn't need to mean discounting. That could mean that you are giving them one service and bundling it with another. So a really common one, the Tesco meal deal. If you actually look at the breakdown of the prices, you're probably only saving about 20p. But everyone goes, oh, it's a deal, £3, love it. So they go and buy a meal deal, and therefore people are more inclined to go and pay for it because they feel like they're getting a bargain. But if you bundled a few items together, so if you were in beauty, for example, you might group, like one of my friends, she's the body shop consultant. She will do deals where she groups them all together, and me being the geek that I am and an accountant, I'm there looking at it thinking, well, actually, you're saving about 20p, but all these people are commenting like, oh, lovely, I'll have this. So a bundle's a good one. What also you can do to get consistency is if you're in something where you've got loyal customers and they come back again and again, book them at the time. So don't allow them to, well, don't hold them in, but don't allow them to necessarily walk out the door without having booked the next item. So hairdressers, if I'm left to go, or like my dog, she has her grooming. If she's left to go and I've not booked in the next one, it will slip my mind. And then I'll look at my dog in 6 weeks and think, oh my God, look at the state of her. Whereas if at the time the lady says to me, okay, should we do 5 weeks from now? And I'm like, yeah, fine, job done, tick. And then she's got her regular income, she's got her consistency, and I don't have to think about it. So that's another really good one you can do.
Excellent. Thank you, Nicola. And then James has asked, when launching a new business or service, how do you work out how much profit you should or could aim to make?
Okay, so that's a great one as well, because each industry has different items. So what a good profit margin in one industry isn't necessarily a good profit margin in another. So we actually can do benchmarking to help you with that. So you can obviously just go to Google and look at your industries, but if you want more specific and more bespoke, there are benchmarking tools that can be used to help you so you know what's good. And obviously when you're starting up a new business, it's worth planning that properly so that you get it right from the start instead of getting part way in and then thinking, oh, I need to reverse a bit, I've done this wrong.
Brilliant. Excellent. Thank you. And then 1 minute to go. And the last question, I've got a question from Mark. What can we do if the customers just have not got the money? So if instead of discounting, is there anything that we could do if they've just physically not got the money to use us? What would your advice be on that?
So that's a more difficult one, because yeah, you don't really want to discount because it's eating away at your profits. So if they've not got the money, the first thing is, and this kind of is linked to cash flow, so you'd still need to be careful with this. Could you look at spreading their costs? So could you sign them up and take an initial amount, but look to spread the cost? So we talked previously about stage payments. Could that help to secure the business, that instead of them paying in one hit, They maybe pay in a few different hits to help. So just be aware that your cash flow can sustain that, but you're then not actually cutting the discount. So you're not cutting your profit. You are still going to make the same profit. You're just going to have to wait for that cash.
Excellent, thank you. Just two from me on that. If you have to, if they've physically not got the money, can you reduce what you're actually doing for them? So instead of doing 100% of the service, you only do 80% of the service, or you extract something out of the offering that that you are giving. And then last, which is not ideal, but is to trade that discount for something else that they can do that doesn't actually cost them any money. So trade it for referrals, or as Nicholas says, payment terms. So get them to pay up front rather than pay over the time, or testimonials on a website, and all that sort of stuff. And then Mark's just contributed that subscription models, so monthly payments are great for consistent income. Yeah, it's really, really good one, Mark. So if you can get somebody paying £50 a month, whether or not they actually have the massage or the haircut or whatever, then the money turns up even if the person doesn't necessarily. So that's a really good idea. Just check there and there. So no, that's answered all of the questions. That just leaves me to say thank you very much to everybody for coming along and listening to the session this morning. As I said, the feedback form is in the chat box. It's really important to us that you take action off the back of what we've shared. So can you please do that? So thank you very much for coming along, and obviously thank you to Nicola for sharing her expertise around how you could increase your sales and reduce your costs in order to create profit. So before I do the obligatory Zoom wave goodbye, is there anything else you'd like to add, Nicola?
No, that's perfect. Thank you.
Brilliant. Excellent. So that's all from us. So thank you very much for coming along, and bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.